All right, now we should be good.
All right, let's try this again. Exodus chapter 1. Some of you would remember when they came out with the big movie, Cecil B. DeMille, and it was the Ten Commandments. Do you remember that? Some of you probably don't remember that. But Charlton Heston played Moses, if you remember. Some of you remember that. And that was a big movie way back in probably the 60s. Then Disney people came along and they came out with an animated movie about Moses' life, supposedly, and that was called The Prince of Egypt. And they tried to depict Moses. They didn't do a very good job of it. And I guess the real important thing for us is that the most reliable account of Moses' life is found in the Bible, and we can count on that being everything that we need to know about Moses. So I've been studying Moses and trying to get a better understanding of his life. But in order to do that, we kind of have to understand his background. And we'll get to that in just a moment. But let's look at Exodus chapter 1 and verse 5. Exodus chapter 1, verse 5. And it reads like this. And all the souls that came out of the loins of Jacob were 70 souls, for Joseph was in Egypt already. Now, we'll get to the important part of that verse in just a moment. And Joseph died, and all his brethren, and all that generation. And the children of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly, and multiplied, and waxed exceeding mighty, and the land was filled with them. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. Now that's important also. And he said unto his people, Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply. And it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. We'll stop reading right there. So we have in this account that the Pharaoh of Egypt of this particular time was fearful. He was threatened by the children of Israel because they had grown so much numerically. Now, during the day of Joseph, when Joseph brought all of his family back into Egypt. Now, if you want to remember that Joseph had been sold by his brothers into slavery. He'd been taken to Egypt. He was in Potiphar's house. Potiphar's wife accused him of, rape. And, of course, we know that wasn't true. He ended up in prison. Then, in turn, he was able to give information so that the Pharaoh was able to understand his dreams. You probably all remember this. And so eventually then Joseph becomes the prime minister of Egypt, second in command to Pharaoh. That's an amazing story. So here he is, and he has been the prime minister of Egypt, and this has been a very important time in his life. And the interesting thing here is that from them, fast forward to the time of Moses and the time of this writing, we have 400 years of time pass, okay? So during that 400 years, you have to understand that they went from 70 people to over 2 million people. That's quite an increase. They were really fruitful and multiplied. Now, just to help you understand this, when you read through the book of Genesis, maybe you want to just go through and see how many times the Lord told the people of that day to be fruitful and multiply and to fill the earth. Well, the children of Israel did their best to do that. So now we come down to this time where this particular Pharaoh he doesn't trust the children of Israel. He doesn't know anything about Joseph, doesn't care to know anything about Joseph, and he is kind of paranoid about how many people now are part of the children of Israel. 2 million plus, that's a lot of people. So now he comes to this point in his rule of Egypt that he's concerned that if one of the armies that would come against Egypt, that the children of Israel would side with them. They'd move in and go with them and fight against the Egyptians. And if you were listening when I read that, he also said, or they may go up out of the land. What he was concerned about was they might leave Egypt. Now, the reason he wouldn't want them to leave Egypt is they had become slaves. They were building cities. They did all kinds of things for the Pharaoh, and so he just about couldn't live with them because there were so many of them, and he couldn't live without them because he was addicted to their slavery, what they were doing. So this is some of the background. Now, in turn, during this whole time, Pharaoh says, all right, we're going to have to stop all of this growth. And he came up with the plan. And the first plan, maybe this is plan A, but the first plan was he was going to make all the men work really, really, really hard. He really put the taskmasters up against them, and he was beating them. He was doing everything, and that was all with the idea that if they were so tired when they got home from work that they weren't ready to have relations with their wives. They weren't going to have any more children. That didn't work. In fact, they multiplied even more. So then he gets another idea. He says, okay, I'm going to talk to the midwives. Now, they didn't have PhD or MDs that delivered babies. They had midwives, and the midwives would go and they would get with the women that were going to give birth, and they'd be there when the baby was born. And here's what his plan was. He said, okay, you watch and see when the Israelite women, when they start to give birth, he said, you check and see if they're male or female, and if they're male, you suffocate them and tell the mother they were stillborn. That's pretty wicked, isn't it? So that's what his plan was. Well, he didn't count on the fact that the midwives weren't going to have anything to do with that. They weren't going to go along with that. And he called them in and he said, What are you doing? You were supposed to kill these babies. They said, no, the Israelite women, they said they're lively. That's what it says in the Bible. What it means is they were really quick delivering their babies, and the babies got delivered before we ever could get on the scene to help them. They already had their babies, so we couldn't do anything with them. That wasn't happening. So then he gets the bright idea, and this is plan C. He says, all right, all the male babies, they're going to be cast in the Nile River and drowned, or probably more likely eaten by crocodiles, because there was crocodiles in the Nile River. So that's kind of the background to all of this that's going to happen now in the situation with Moses. So the midwives wouldn't cooperate. They couldn't get them to do anything with these babies. The throwing the babies into the river, that was the next thing. Now we come to chapter 2, and I'm moving along very quickly because I know we're limited on how much time we have. Verse 1, chapter 2, and there went a man of the house of Levi and took to wife a daughter of Levi. And the woman conceived and bare a son, and when she saw him that he was a goodly child, she hid him 3 months. So here we have these two. They're both from the tribe of Levi. Now, what do we know about the tribe of Levi? Do you remember what they were? They were the priests. Eventually, Moses appointed them to be the priests, and they cared for the tabernacle. You remember they'd moved the tabernacle out through the wilderness, and it was the tribe of Levi, and they did that work. So here, these are from the tribe of Levi. This is Moses' parents, okay? And it says in verse 3, and when she could no longer hide him, she took for him an ark of bulrushes and daubed it with slime and with pitch and put the child therein. She laid it in the flags by the river's brink. And his sister stood afar off to wit what would be done to him. So here we have it. This is the plan of the parents. Now they don't want to destroy Moses. They looked at him and said, "This is a special child." In fact, when you read this in some other translations, it says this was no ordinary child. This was a special child. It appeared as though he was very special, and as you'll come to find out, if you study any more out of Exodus, you'll find out that he was a very special child, and he was very smart, and we may not be able to get to all of that tonight, but he was a special person. He was very, very amazing. So here Amram and Jochebed, that's the parents, that's their names. We haven't gotten to that yet. So they're going to have this baby, and Jochebed takes the basket and she waterproofs it, and she's going to put Moses in that basket. Now, she placed the baby in the basket, and she does something that I wouldn't have done. She takes the baby in the basket and puts it in the Nile River. Now, would you have done that? I don't think so. I mean, they already know that that was a place of death. This was a place where all of these other babies, they had been destroyed. They'd throw them in the Nile River, and that was the end of them. So she put the baby in the basket, puts it in the Nile River. Now, this was a place where babies were murdered. But here's what their thinking was. Their thinking was nobody had looked for a live baby in the Nile River. They're not going to look there for that. So here they decide to do this. Now, there's another part to this plan. Jochebed chose a particular place in the Nile River to put this baby. Now, I got to tell you, I remember flannel graph. How many of you remember flannel graph when you were in Sunday school? And you saw them sticking the baby in the Nile River, and you'd think, oh, yeah, he's floating around, bobbing around in the Nile River. No. He was placed in the bulrushes. And we're going to find out that that was a special place, and we'll see that in just a minute. So Jochebed, chose this particular place in the Nile River because she knew Pharaoh's daughter came to this spot to bathe. In fact, she got to the point where she studied her pattern of behavior and all of this. And she's watching, and she sees what day the princess shows up, what time of day she comes, how long she stays. So she's got a plan. Jochebed's had a plan all along the way. And why not put Moses where he could be found by a person who could save his life? The daughter of the man who had issued the death edict in the first part. And just think of this. Here is Jochebed, and she's going to put him in this Nile River in the bulrushes where the princess comes, and the princess is the daughter of the man that's ordered these babies to be killed. Again, that wouldn't have been my plan. I don't think I would have done that. Well, hoping against hope, they trusted God to change the prince's heart and mind and to find Moses there floating in the bulrushes. They trusted God to cause Pharaoh's daughter to be attracted to little Moses. Now, I got to tell you, and I've been studying this, again, going back to flannel graph, you would see the princess, and she looked like a grown woman. Not so. She was probably 8 or 9 years old. Oh, yeah, and I've got proof to prove it, okay? But anyway, archaeologists have determined that that's how old she probably was. I know some of you are looking really stunned at that. It makes a lot of sense. You know why? She looked at that baby and said, man, that's something for me to play with. I'm going to take this baby home. Well, things changed very quickly because the baby started to cry. If she was a grown woman, she'd have known what to do. She didn't know what to do. And it's really interesting what happens then. So here she is, and she finds the baby, and the baby's in the basket, and she has some of her servants chase this down, gets the baby, brings it to her, and she starts looking at it, and the baby starts to cry, and she says, what am I going to do now? Here's part of the plan again. This is Jochebed's plan. Guess what? She has Moses' sister, Miriam, placed in a strategic spot where she can come, and she says, would you like some help? Can I help you? Do you want me to find somebody that can take care of this baby? How about that? And so here she's offering some help. And the princess says, that's a great idea. Let's do that. And what does Miriam do? She goes and gets Moses' mother and brings her to the princess. Now, I got to thinking about that. I don't think that Jochebed just ran right up there and looked real eager to take care of this baby. I think she had to be cool about it and say, yeah, I'll help you. I'll be okay. I'll be fine. Yeah, I can do that. And what's really amazing, this whole thing, the princess says, okay, you can take care of her. You can raise her at your home. And by the way, I'm even going to pay you to take care of the baby. I think that's hilarious. Don't you think? I mean, that's amazing. So here she is, and she is taking her own baby back to her own home to take care of the baby. And what's really interesting is she has the protection of the princess of Egypt, who is going to eventually be Moses' stepmother or foster mother. And so here she is. She's going to take care of her. She's going to be protected, and everything's going to be great, and it's going to work out really fine for them. And I said all of this to really get to the life lessons of this, because this is my favorite part. Life lessons, first of all, and you may want to write these down. Hard times don't erase God's promises. I'm going to say that to you again. Hard times don't erase God's promises. Do you believe God's promises? Do you understand the promises that God has made to us here in His Word? Aren't they great? Are any of you excited about the promises of God? I hope you are. You see, these people found themselves in a terrible situation. But God promised. He said, I'm going to send a deliverer. When times grow hard, it is easy to jump to the conclusion that God has forgotten His promises. We were at one of our elderly ladies' home last week. And this is a lady that we visit. And her husband passed away some time ago. And she lives by herself. She's having a really difficult time. And she basically is in depression. And Rose and I went to visit her and just talked a little bit to her, just to remind her of what God had done for her and how God had helped her and God had looked after her and how God had met her. And I said, look, maybe you just want to make a list of all the good things God has done for you. I said, you got a nice home with a roof over your head. You got a vehicle you can drive. You got money to buy your food and your medicine that you need. I said, you've got all of these things. You got a church that you go to where people are nice to you. And she said, sometimes I just forget. And sometimes we just forget how good God is to us. And we forget that He's made promises to us. And He always keeps His promise. And so the whole world, the whole nation may forget about God's promises, but God doesn't forget. He doesn't. In the day that we live in, well, I'm telling you, moral decay, all kinds of craziness going on, scandal. We got all of these things going on. We've got politicians that seemingly lie to us. It's really gotten bad. And the thing is, then we kind of project onto the Lord what's going on in our world. And we start thinking, these politicians, they don't keep their promises. I don't know whether God's going to keep his promises to me or not. Listen, God always keeps his promises. You can look at all the surroundings around you, and you can see all the wickedness and all the craziness that's going on and things that are happening, and some of them we just really don't like. I mean, when you start thinking about abortion and the fight that's going on in Texas right now over that and different things that are going on, and yet you say, where is God in all of this? Well, just hang on. He's right there. And he hasn't fallen asleep. He doesn't need CNN to keep up with the latest developments. At the proper moment, at the time determined before the foundation of the world, he will send forth his Son again, and he'll come again. And the real admonition is for us to look up, because our redemption draws nigh. Well, the mighty King of Kings will return to deliver his blood-bought people. The earth may melt, the stars may fall from the heavens, but the living God will not forget what he has promised. That ought to make you really happy tonight. Whatever he's promised, he'll fulfill. The second life lesson: harsh treatment doesn't escape God's notice. I want to read you this out of Exodus chapter 3 and verse 7. And this is when the Lord met with Moses at the burning bush. I want you to listen to this. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people which are in Egypt, and have heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. And I am come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land unto a good land, and a large, unto a land flowing with milk and honey, unto the place of the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the Perizzites, the Hivites and the Jebusites, and all those other sites. And the thing that you want to remember here is that God had made some great promises to a man named Abraham. And then in turn, he made those same promises to his son Isaac. And in turn, he made those same promises to Jacob. And he makes those same promises now to Moses to say, okay, we're going to follow through with this. This is going to happen. Harsh treatment doesn't escape God's notice. Do you ever imagine that your hard, harsh moments and tests escape God's notice? You say, God doesn't care. He doesn't know what's going on. He is not there. He's not paying attention. You may become so discouraged, so filled with pain, that you begin to think God couldn't be aware of your circumstances, or if he is aware, he just doesn't care. Well, I got to tell you, that's a lie from Satan himself. You see, he loves to contradict what God says. He loves to say, well, God didn't really mean that. God really isn't interested in your problems. God isn't aware of what's going on. And you just know that God doesn't really show any interest in what's going on in your life. But God is aware, and he cares very deeply about all that's going on in your life. He will do whatever it takes to rescue his people. His deliverance may not arrive on your timetable, however. And this is one of the problems that we face today. We want things right now. We want things immediately. We live in this culture today that everything happens very quickly. I mean, you can stick your food in your microwave and it's cooked just like that. You can have things so quickly that you don't have to wait at all. I got news for you. God doesn't operate on that kind of schedule. He has a timetable, and he knows exactly when and where to fulfill his promises. So his deliverance may not arrive on your timetable or in the manner you expect it, but it will arrive at the best time, the right time. He will not abandon his own. Boy, I tell you what, that encourages my heart today. And then finally, the last life lesson. Heavy tests don't eclipse God's concern. Regardless of the severity of the test you may be facing, it can never overshadow His concern. This has been a difficult year. Some of you may be wondering why Rose and I are here. We're on our way to Canada. This has finally opened up so we can go to Canada. My wife hasn't seen her mother in a year and 9 months. That's been tough. It's been hard on a lot of the people that have been in nursing homes and assisted living and hospitals. It's been a rough year. For pastors, we haven't been able to go into hospitals in a lot of cases because the hospitals have no visiting signs. There have been a lot of people that have gotten sick. We've had a number of people in our church down in Tennessee that passed away. They died during this time. We have people that they couldn't even have a funeral because of what was going on. That's a tough time. I mean, there's all kinds of things going on. And now we have an economy that's really not going so well. We've got prices that have gone out of sight. I think I told Pastor Will this last night. My son-in-law, we've been working on his house, and they had cedar siding on their house. Do you know that woodpeckers really like cedar siding? And I mean, they were drilling holes in this siding, and then to top that off, and I don't know whether I don't remember us having carpenter bees here in Michigan, but we had them in Tennessee, and they attacked that siding as well. So we started in, and we have taken off the cedar siding on the two gable ends of the house and all the way across the front of the house. It had black fiberboard. We pulled all of that all off. We took all the insulation out. We put new insulation on. We put this new board over that, and then we put hardy board siding over that. You should see woodpeckers try to hit that because it's made out of concrete. So anyway, got 3 sides done and windows, new windows, and all of this kind of stuff. Now we want to do the back side of their house. The materials for the back side are going to cost more than the 3 other sides of the house. Price of materials gone sky high. And along with that, then we have hurricanes. And we have flooding. And we have people that perish in the floods. And people go, where is God in all of that? Let me tell you, He's right there. You see, He's not the author of all of those problems. There is another one, his name is Satan, and he's the one that's behind all of that. Do you believe that tonight? Yeah. So heavy tests don't eclipse God's concern. He's right there at your side. He has never left. He has never stopped caring for you, thinking about you, considering your situation, and loving you beyond what you can comprehend. Well, the life of Moses. What a great study. I wish we could had more time tonight. I know you want to get to prayer and all that, and I could go on for a couple hours here, but I won't do that to you. But there's so many good things in this whole study. Just think of this. Moses then is taken into the palace of the Egyptian Pharaoh. Do you understand what that meant? He had all the rights and privileges of a son of the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh's daughter, the princess, she was now ready to raise him. Do you know what happens then? He gets the finest education Egypt has to offer. It's no wonder he could write the first 5 books of the Bible. I mean, he went to the Temple University of Egypt. The Sun Temple is what they called it. You know what that's like? That'd be like going to Oxford in England today. It's that good. Along with that, he learned all kinds of things. He learned all things about military strategies. When he got a little bit older, the Ethiopians attacked Egypt. and the Ethiopians were winning. You know what happened? Pharaoh called Moses in and he says, I'm going to send you up to the battlefront and you're going to be the general of the army. And you know what? Moses went up there and he turned the tide with the Ethiopians and they won the battle and drove the Ethiopians out. That's from Josephus if you need some proof of that, okay? Along with that, he was able, and if you read on in Exodus, maybe you'd like to read a little more of Exodus. One of the things it says, and this just kills me. He said he was mighty in words and deeds. Remember that? That means he was an orator. He could speak to big crowds of people. And what's really funny is, what is one of the first excuses that he gives God when God says, I want you to go and deliver the children of Israel? What do you say? I can't speak. I can't speak. Like fun, you can't speak. You can speak. You're a great orator. What's wrong with you? But here's what happens. And when he starts to travel around and see his fellow Israelites, he sees how terrible they've got it. He sees a taskmaster beating one of his own people. And what does he do? He goes over and kills the person. And then he knows he's in trouble. And along with that, then he comes back another day, and two of the Israelites are fighting, and he tries to stop them, and they say, who made you judge over us, and who do you think you are to come and tell us? And it works just the opposite of what he had hoped, because he had hoped that when he killed the Egyptian, that would be the springboard for him to be the deliverer of the children of Israel. And guess what? He jumped ahead of God. He was doing something in his own strength. And in turn, he ends up having to go to the desert for 40 years and enter the Mount Sinai Bible Institute. And he must have been a slow learner because he was there for 40 years. I want you to just think about all of these things and get out your Bible and read Exodus. And you say, man, Pastor, I can hardly read. I can hardly get through all of those names. You know, they all have a very important purpose. So just remember that when you read those and say, God had a purpose for this. I'm not sure what it was, but I'm going to go through with it. Thank you for letting us speak to you this evening. God bless you. I know